Of our workshop, our financial workshop for the fiscal year of 2025 budget. Tonight is just a workshop for the committee members of the finance committee, as well as the board of aldermen and our administrator and a finance director and public works director. I anticipate this being, hold on a second, sorry. Either this or I cough. I anticipate this being a pretty lengthy meeting, so I appreciate you all sticking it out with us, but I will not have public speaking tonight. If there is time and it doesn't run too long, I may open it up for public speaking, but just keep track of your questions that you may have for department heads or the public works director, administrator, or the committee, and we'll do our best to answer those on Tuesday night's meeting during the public speaking section. So, to go ahead and start this meeting off, we will just dive right in, Stacy, to the budget.
I'll start.
Sally.
So as a little kind of introduction to the budget itself. So I want to state a few things to keep in mind as we're reviewing this. Okay, so first of all, this is the preliminary draft. Okay, and I say that because we still have ongoing meetings with superintendents and departments about their budget. That's still happening. So those aren't complete yet. We're still working through that.
She knows we're not right.
And also, the different boards and committees that would review different sections of the budget have not had that opportunity yet either. So an example would have been that last night would have been utility committee's opportunity to review, and so they've not had a chance to review. Airport board hasn't, Parks and Rec board hasn't, we haven't had a CIP. So none of those other committees that normally would review their sections of the budget have done that yet. So again, very draft, very preliminary, okay? So in this budget, you're going to see, let me talk about additional positions, okay? And I wanna make a statement so that everybody understands, because not everybody in the room was with us over the past 2 to 3 years. So the 2 years leading up to our current budget year, okay, so the 2 previous years, we laid off 5 staff, okay? Those 5 staff have not been hired back. So they were eliminated from the budget and have not been put back in, okay? So you know, it's come up about, well, you know, vacant positions, or are you fully staffed or are you not? So fully staffed is kind of depends on what perspective you're looking at it from. So right now, the city's fully staffed with the exception of the 5 positions we have posted on our website, okay? Except there are still those other 5 that were cut in the 2 previous years that have never been put back in the budget, okay? So if you think of that, from 3 years ago, we're 10 staff down right now. And that's a huge impact. And so I just wanted to preface that. So we all understand kind of where we're at and how we got here. So in this budget you're gonna see tonight, there are 2.5 positions added, okay? 2 of them are for the wastewater treatment plant, and they are required by DNR regulations, okay? They require that we have 4 people at the wastewater treatment plant, okay? We've only had 2 previously. So 2 new positions for the wastewater treatment plant. The other half of the position is for animal control. So as things have changed over the past year and a half or so, and we have animals that we're housing there, it's not just like overnight or a day or 2, and things are changing, we're gonna need at least another half a person to help Travis. You know, he does all the maintenance and upkeep at that building, the mowing the grass, feeding, cleaning kennels on weekends, as well as during the week, all of that. And so we need to give him some relief there. So those are the only positions included in what you'll see tonight, okay? There are some additional positions that are on the wish list, okay? And so they're not in the numbers tonight, but keep in mind, those are Economic Development Director, right? We haven't filled that since I stepped out of that role. It's something the county's been asking about. It's something the Industrial Development Authority Board has been asking about. And it's something kind of we have said we were gonna try to put back in this coming year's budget, but it's not in tonight's numbers, okay? An additional patrol officer, okay, for the police department. We've been using what is Moore's position right now?
Reserve.
A reserve officer lately. You know, and so in an effort to kind of keep overtime down and things like that, there's a additional patrol officer, again, not in tonight's numbers, okay? And then the third one is a maintenance person, who would be in charge of maintenance of all facilities and buildings, okay? So kind of to prevent a future ESP kind of episode, okay? I don't know what else to call that. But to make sure that we're staying on top of maintenance, we have somebody who has it scheduled out, who is looking at these things ahead of time, not just reactionary, because that's kind of where we are right now, okay? So those three positions are not in this evening's numbers, okay? We wanted you guys to kind of get a look and a feel for where we're at first. Okay, so what is included, we do have a proposed 3% COLA, that is reflected in the numbers, okay? And a 2% merit increase, okay? That would be based upon how an individual employee scores on their evaluation, okay? Another thing to keep in mind when you're looking at salary and wage numbers is that the numbers reflected are not necessarily, say it's in a department of one, okay? That's not necessarily that individual's wage. And I say that because in our policies, employees have the option to cash out sick time, 1 time a year, and vacation time, 1 time a year. We don't know when an individual employee is gonna choose to do that, so we have to budget for having those amounts in their salary line item. And they may or may not choose to cash them out, but we have to have it there available, okay? So that number doesn't necessarily reflect what they earn in that year's time, okay, without cashing out extra. So when we get to capital improvements, like I mentioned, we've not had a capital improvement committee meeting. Those numbers we are definitely still working through, just like the rest of the budget. Had meetings with some of our superintendents just today, still trying to work through some of this. So it's all, we're getting close, but it's not in final form by any means. When we get to the utilities section, like I said, again, utility committee hasn't had a chance to review this, but a few things to keep in mind. The revenues reflected in the utility section for tonight's presentation are based upon current utility rates. There's no projections of any changes. Now, that doesn't mean I think that's how it'll stay, but because the utility committee hasn't had a chance to review and have input, we just left it at current rates. Okay. And this is getting closer to the end of the whole presentation tonight, but something new that you're gonna see this year, we've talked about it in utility committee already. You're going to see a DNR fund, so that stands for depreciation and replacement, that is broken out separately. So last year, as a new shift, we started really funding those reserve accounts, and we didn't really separate reserves from the repair and replacement. We're now separating those out. So repair and replacement is a fund, like a savings account, that every year we put a little bit in. If we have to replace a vehicle or make a major repair, we have that fund sitting there ready to go, okay? Okay. I think that's all I have for the beginning notes, okay? So just, like I said, things I want you to keep in mind as we're kind of walking through, okay? Are you ready, Miss Stacy, to start in? All right. Find where I have this pull up here. Okay. No, it doesn't, it never fits all on one page.
Okay, so the city uses fund accounting. I think everyone's pretty familiar with all of our funds. But, the city does have 34 funds, and, we're set up as fund accounting so that we can keep track of the amount of cash assigned for different purposes and for each different departments. Like I said, we have 34 funds. Some of these funds are restricted funds, which means they can only be used for those funds, for that purpose. As you can see, some of these funds have little to no activity, so for tonight, we're only gonna focus on the larger funds that have actual activity. The report shows each fund, it shows the beginning balance of each fund, and this is, year-to-date for this fiscal year, and this is through the end of April. And then the next column is year-to-date revenues, and we got, year-to-date expenses, transfers in and out amongst departments, and then the ending fund balance as of April 30th. Anything else?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
we kind of start here because that ending fund balance then basically becomes the beginning fund balance for the next budget year. Okay. So
So if you go all the way to the bottom, gives us a total of all of the funds. So at the beginning of this fiscal year, we started at 7.9 million. Right now, we're holding around 10 million. Of course, that's gonna change. We still have several expenses. It's gonna come out within the next few months, so. Yes, you go next page. And this is a slide you're all used to seeing in the council meetings, but this is just an overall look at our sales tax revenue. As you all know, the city collects a 1% sales tax for the general fund. That took effect in 1980. Then last year, the voters did approve to increase that tax to 2%. That took effect in October of last year. So we started collecting in October. Through May, these numbers are through May, we have collected a little over 1.4 million in the general fund for the 1% general sales tax. That is a 1% increase from the same time frame as last year. If you remember earlier in the year, we kept seeing decreases in this line, but it's kind of caught itself back up. We're about 1% compared to the same time frame as last year. And then, for the 2% sales tax, like I said, we started collecting in October, so we brought in about 749,000. Parks and Rec, they have a 3/8% sales tax, which the voters voted in 2015. This is a restricted fund that can only be used for the local parks of the city. And then through May, they have collected 528,000. Then, we also collect a 0.5 cent sales tax for capital improvement fund. This was passed by the voters in 2003. This is also a restricted fund that can only be used for capital improvements. And, so far we've collected 704,000, and that's through May. Then there's just a graph below that just kind of gives you a comparison. The dotted orange line is this fiscal year, to compare it to the other past years, and then the light blue dotted line is with the 2%, the extra 1% sales tax added in. So that's what it's gonna look like going forward. Any questions from the committee? Okay, so we'll move on to the general fund. And these numbers year-to-date are through the end of April. So through the end, so we brought in total revenue so far year-to-date, 2.4 million. We projected to end the year, the next column over, that's where we project to end this fiscal year. So we project to end around 2.9 million in revenues. And then, expenditures, if you scroll down a little bit, year-to-date, we've spent 2.3 million, we anticipate to spend 2.9 million.
And if anyone's wondering how we're doing relative to how we budgeted this year, so this is year-to-date, and our anticipated how we expect to end the year, the column before is what was budgeted.
Scroll down just a little bit. We anticipate to end this year with a surplus of 391,000. Right there.
Do you wanna talk about what we're proposing for this
Yeah.
budget year?
Yeah. So the next, that highlighted column towards the, second to the left, that's our draft budget that we've kind of put together. So, we're anticipating around 3.5 million in revenues. And if you look at the right, the very far right column that compares last year's budget, just if it's a positive, that's the amount over. So you can see where 727,000 is the, additional sales tax, is why it's more than last year. It's that much more than last year. So, yeah, then, so expenditures, we're looking at almost 3.2 million. With to end around 572,000. The other sources. The other sources would be the 351,000 in the proposed budget, or draft budget. That is the transfer from electric. So again, and then the other uses, that's the, transfers that we make to like, cemetery, economic development, and I think, we have to discuss if we're going to do a transfer for the, fireworks this year.
Do you wanna talk about how we came up with the number for transfer, or not yet?
You can.
So, you know, this is something we've been working on, is reducing that transfer from electric utility to the general fund. Okay? So you can kinda see here in years past, okay, this one is, I'm sorry, I gotta look at the budget year, fiscal year 22 is where this starts here, this graph. It was $638, $750, $750,000. 600,000 is what's budgeted for this year. At this point, we've not discussed not transferring that full amount right now, okay? So we've done half of it, which is how we normally do it. Mid-year, we transfer half of the amount, and then the other half comes at the end of the year. So from 600,000, we're looking at reducing that down to 351,000, okay? So that number, you know, there are multiple ways, we've kinda talked about some of them in the past, that cities determine what that is. And some of you have heard me, I've cautioned you, we won't get to zero, and we shouldn't get to zero, and I know that might upset a few folks, but the reason we shouldn't get to zero, if this were an independent utility operating in our community, so owned by someone else, then they would be paying the city a franchise fee. And so that's how we came to this number, the 351,000. We applied a 5% franchise fee to the electric utility, and that's what that number is. Even RMU pays a fee to the city of Rolla. Almost every city, I've never heard of one that doesn't do some type of transfer. Many of them use a franchise fee, and that's actually what's recommended by NPUA, is to do a type of franchise fee. And again, then it makes it fair if another utility is operating or something else is going on in the community. So that's how we came up with that number.
Scroll up just a little bit. So some of the major changes, if you look again at the far right column, you
Where are
can
we
see
going? Sorry,
on the draft budget.
right. Where you going?
Look at the last column, any major changes,
Oh, here,
and let's look more towards expenditures.
okay.
So your animal control is that first one at 24,000 almost. Again, that's that added position. If you scroll down, the next largest is non-departmental, 14,000. Most of that is our general liability insurance across the board is going up 28%, at least 28%. So, and there's several things within non-departmental, you know, like the admin building, the old city hall.
Mhm.
So there's
All
several
in
things.
there.
So that line, budget line's going up quite a bit. And then, of course, your police department, that's mostly, that's the general liability, and then also the raises that we are asking for. Let's see. And then on streets, cause it's actually going down. First of all, looks like I over budgeted for this year's budget compared to what it should have actually been. Plus, we had someone retire, had been here for several years, so his salary amount was way more than someone new that would be hiring for that position. So we're actually seeing a reduction in that budget line. So then again, that's all the major changes within the general fund, so. The next several slides, if you wanna look at individual departments or something within each department, we can, however you guys wanna do it, so.
Quick question on the liability insurance, that seems to be a significant increase, do we
Yeah.
put that out to bid? I know we do for health insurance, but I didn't know about.
I don't have that answer.
Tammy did not get it done this year, she talked about it, but then she ended up having her health issues and having to be out of work, she did not get that done. But we do anticipate next year putting that out for bid.
So we're locked into it for another year, right?
And we've had a lot of claims this year, so I anticipate next year it's going up even higher, so. Any questions within general fund, or do you wanna look at certain department more in depth, or? it breaks out each individual department and it's in their budget lines.
When we, tell me if I'm in the wrong section, I need to ask this later, but I'm thinking of, I've expressed how much I wanna give back into our employees this year, such as Christmas bonuses, a national appreciation day, not a national, but like a citywide appreciation day for our staff. I know we do the memorial thing, but I would like to, you know, designate a certain day in a month for that. Where would we want to see that and see if we can, you know, what we can do for our staff this year? Cause I wanna be able to budget in some nice, like swag items is what they're called. We give them these nice neon bright t-shirts, but I'd like to see something, for them to be proud of to wear, such as a pullover or a shirt or something as such, for them to receive for being an employee for so many years, or, you know, just to appreciate them and give back to them, because in return, the more we give to them, they're gonna give back to us.
So that would fall under non-departmental.
It would.
Okay.
You know, that's something Sally and I can look at as far as what we think that might be.
What we can afford or do to manage it, cause I would really like, I know at Christmas, we were like, oh, wow, we didn't think of this, I don't want that to be again this coming. Not that we didn't think of it, it was just not a hot topic that year, cause we were focusing on other things.
Want to do a little bit more employee appreciation because it's employee
Right.
retention is the hardest thing that we're
Right.
at.
Yeah, and I mean, it falls under employee recognition, is
Yeah.
what,
Right.
I mean, yeah.
Take a look.
Of course, Steve's working off the table, he's asking for that.
Just trying to get
He inherited my old day.
Unacceptable.
He's like, this is not working.
Sally was on a year and a half.
I'm sure Chief can build you one, it's pretty handy.
Right.
Wish you-
Do what?
We stand with the two cents.
Well, that's
Yeah,
true,
so-
that's true.
Yeah.
We can pass those on.
Yeah.
Should have,
There you go. Incentive.
Any other questions or sections that you guys wanna delve into, the details, I mean, we understand, you guys haven't seen this before, but that was one of the, you know, reasons to go ahead and have this meeting this evening is that then you guys get a first glance, and then you're gonna have a month and a half where you can be thinking over some of this stuff, understanding it's gonna be, some of it's gonna be changing, we're gonna be shifting some things as we move, but we wanted to at least give you guys that preliminary look, and then you can provide us feedback as we move along. So it's really up to you guys how much in-depth you all want to go tonight. So we can go into details for the general fund piece, or we can move on to a different section. Anyone from the committee?
Do we wanna touch on the Freedom Activity Center since, I mean, how that's gonna significantly change from
Should we go to the
previous years?
detail portion?
Oh, I guess, I'm sorry, that is later on in the,
Well, it's
we don't
not,
have to-
it's
okay.
general
It's part
fund,
of general
so,
fund.
okay,
right, but
See,
it's
I'm
the
getting
it's the non-departmental,
okay,
portion.
Actually, Freedom, they have their own section.
because I know we have a few new, so
Well,
several
it's
who've been
in
on for.
multiple.
Freedom Activity Center.
No, but the janitorial's in non-departmental,
It's contagious
Yeah.
now.
so we're,
It's not me tonight.
so we're at.
You start, Catherine finishes.
Sorry.
It's like a
I was trying
band.
to think where to go.
Okay,
Alright.
You're on.
I'm with you, I won't be on the team.
It's after the city clerk and.
This is a lot, okay.
Don't let that, so.
Hmm?
Figured I'd just try to clear it. Didn't wanna bring you guys up.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is where it starts.
Yeah.
Well, their janitorial supplies,
Right, so you see here this negative.
by an hour,
Right.
coming budget year here. We still have their building maintenance.
Right.
The janitor that we were providing for them was at a non-departmental that was taken out, so.
Right, so that's where that
But that
reflects
one-
is in a different section over here, but, right.
And then on their utilities, what, did we come up with? I forgot what I guess we said we would pay the 28.8, which credit if they went over, or they would have to pay us if they went
So is that like his retainer?
We
Essentially,
pay a certain amount every month,
no
yeah.
matter what.
And well, and I think it's in the contract that if he has an excessive amount, he bill us more, but since I've been here, he's not done that.
So this is really salary.
I mean, in essence, it's a contract basis.
Right.
Yes. That's why it's special services and not shown as a regular wage.
So do we wanna just go by this section by section, or do we want to, how would you guys like to go over this? Would you wanna go over it as we are right now, just kinda looking over it individually, or would you like Stacy to go over it, item by item?
I was gonna say.
I mean, not every item.
Exceptions.
Yes,
Yeah, I'll go
okay.
with you.
Dave would like to go over specific point outs of the budget, probably the high topics. General fund we just went over, so maybe like each department, is that what you're thinking? Each
The
department?
next fund.
One within
The next
it was an
fund.
The next
exception or
fund.
change, yeah.
Special streets is our next.
Okay.
Just,
I didn't get it figured out what page he was on. He's pretty much on it.
21.
21. Oh, there it is.
One more.
Okay.
It's 22.
Need some of my quick flips.
Okay, so our special street fund, this source of revenue comes from a gas tax sales, tax on vehicles, and vehicle fees. This is a restricted, fund that can only be used for street maintenance and equipment for street maintenance. So, we anticipate year-to-date, we brought in 198,000. We project to bring in 225,000. For the end of this fiscal year. And then, now I forgot to add in. Okay, total revenues for this year to date is 221,000. We anticipate to bring in 253,000. Go down to expenses. So far, we've only spent 33,000. I'm not sure if we'll get the street maintenance done or not. I know, Brent just had a bid opening or.
Yeah, it's not gonna fall in this budget, you
Yeah, I
know.
don't think so. So I don't know that we'll do any of that street maintenance or not, but I put it in there as anticipated that we'll have that spent. So we anticipate to end the year, go down just a little bit. We anticipate to end this budget year at 95,000, but if we don't do that street maintenance, it'll be another extra 120 on top of that. But if we don't, I guess we can maybe double up on the next budget year to get that
Well,
done.
and that's, yeah, so anything not used in the current budget year
Could be rolled over.
is retained in the fund, right?
Right.
And then that we could pull from that for a larger street project in the future.
So it becomes the beginning fund balance, it just makes it, the beginning fund balance larger. So, on the draft budget,
Sorry, I went back up to
yeah,
revenues.
no, that's fine, okay, so that draft budget column, this one.
This one here.
Yeah. So if you look kind of, over to the far right, the major changes, you know, so 40,000 there extra that I'm that we're anticipating on revenues. Basically I under budgeted for this fiscal year, we should bring in about 225,000 in sales tax.
Right,
funds,
right.
Even in the draft budget, about 225,000, yeah.
Okay.
And then, so expenses, so we've got in there 120,000 for street maintenance. Same as last year. We were leasing a loader, that lease ends in October. But the department is requesting that since the lease ends, we have the option to buy out. To buy that out would be 84,000. That is cheaper than buying a new one, and the department says it's in really good shape. They prefer to go ahead and just buy it out. It will be split amongst this fund and, the street capital improvement fund. So got that plugged in there.
How many hours of service does that equipment have on it now?
I don't have that off the top of my head. We do have that, but I don't have it on here with me
Okay.
tonight.
And you said that's at 48.5,
Yes.
Yes.
and that's for the loader.
Yes,
Mhm.
that's half.
So that's to
And
pay
it'll come
off
out
the
of-
rest of the lease, which ends in October, and then that's to buy it outright, half of it.
Well, we've had the mechanic evaluate every, piece
Sure.
of equipment, he's quantified that it's good to go for another 5-6 years easily, so I'll get you the hours and send it to you.
Alright, just send me the total
Can you send that
service
to me
hours on it.
too, the make, the model, serial number,
We'll
things like
send
that?
it to the board and the committee.
Now, if we buy it out, they're gonna have like any type of warranty or anything like that?
I wouldn't think so.
I wouldn't think so.
Pretty sure it's run of course, and warranties.
Probably so.
Well, it never hurts to ask,
Right, right.
So total increase in expenditures will be 19,500. Scroll down to show where we end. So we'll have a surplus in the draft budget of 73,000. Any questions on special streets?
Are they going to do like they did last year, Steve? I know you can tell me, y'all do back to me after you talk to Brent, but, last year they provided us with a list of streets that they felt was of high importance.
already.
Already has, perfect,
That's in the CIP, which we're not going over tonight, but
right.
yes. We do have that. Sorry, I'm not Steve, but.
It's the answer that's important.
I'll start calling you Steve if you want.
No, that's okay.
Okay, so the Parks and Rec Fund, its main source of revenue is the 3/8 sales tax. Again, this is a restricted fund, so the funds can only be used for Parks and Rec. They also bring in revenues for charges for services, which is pool receipts and fees from sports programs. Again, they have not reviewed their budget yet, so, yeah, so year-to-date though, revenues are at 592,000. We project them to end their fiscal year at 715,000. And then their expenditures, year-to-date, they're at 446,000. Anticipate to spend 637,000, which leaves them a surplus of around 53,000 at the end of this fiscal year.
And the Parks and Rec budget can only be used for Parks and Rec, it cannot be used for anything else because of their bylaws, from my understanding, correct? So anything that they bring in has to stay within Parks and Rec.
So it would be both their bylaws as well as the language that the sales tax was passed under.
They are, planning to meet and do a 5-year budget plan for us. And then, so hopefully that'll be to us by the time,
Monday after next is
Yeah.
their next meeting, so.
be to us by the next time we all meet.
But as of right now, their draft budget, they're estimating the revenues to be around 702,000. They plan to spend around 705,000. At 42,800 in other uses, that is their equipment and maintenance. We're gonna create
That depreciation and replacement.
a replacement fund for the parks so that they can start funding that every year. So I've budgeted around 43,000 to go into that fund. I haven't set up the fund yet, but I will. So right now, they are showing a deficit of 45,000. Like you said, their parks, board will have to review, they'll have to decide if they want to cut expenses somewhere, or if they just wanna take it out of their, prior fund balance. And if you look at each one of these funds, I should have told you earlier, it shows the beginning fund balance. So at the beginning of this, so at the end of this fiscal year, they'll have a fund balance of 618,000.
Beginning fund balance.
And then at the end of next budget year, they're anticipated to have 573,000 if they choose to use 45,000.
Right, if they don't make adjustments within the budget for this year.
And they still have how many years left to pay on the pool?
Quite a few.
Quite a
Is
few.
that 38?
I think that's 30, they've got,
Yeah, and it's quite a big payment.
2043.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I can't keep them straight, what's what?
I think there's a 30.
Well, here.
It's at the very end.
It's on the debt service schedule, 2043.
Years.
It's at the very
It's
end.
like $109,000 payment every time you turn around, monthly. It's like $4 or $5 million.
Balance for
Oh, it's the
last
very,
payment,
very last
so
payment.
No, just
Oh,
total project,
okay.
just a
I
Where
thought
we
you
had
meant
paying it
Oh,
off.
no, no.
Okay, do we wanna scroll to that?
That's right right here.
But yeah, we can look at it later, but.
Okay,
Alright.
so we're, now that I've lost this
Do you
entire.
want to? I don't think we
No,
need to
most
go
cities
down
got
to
'em
parks
off as
since
a-
they
Yeah.
haven't even
Right.
reviewed their budget.
I would
but
say not, just
want to.
because they haven't even met over their budget yet, there's no need to go line by line with it until they bring us their final recommendations to their budget. I think I'm personally okay if the committee's okay with skipping it right now.
I agree.
That makes sense.
Okay, so next column.
Capital improvement,
Well, building permit fund.
oh, there it is.
So its source of revenue comes from permits and license fees. They don't usually generate enough to fund their, funds, so we have to usually do a transfer from the general fund. So there's not a whole lot of, okay, so for year-to-date, he brought in 95,000 in revenues. And part of that is kind of skewed a little bit, cause that 81,000, if there's a structure fire within the city, the insurance check sends us 25% of their reimbursement for their insurance until they clean up the property, or Jared has to deem the property safe before we can release that check to them. So we did have a check that came to us, but then if you see on the expense line, the 80,700, it went out. So, it's nice when they come in and go out the same year.
Yeah.
It stinks when it's divided, but. So, we project to end this fiscal year, revenues bring in 97,000, and we plan to spend 101,000. So we, ending the budget year at around 27,000.
When we spend out of this, fund item, what do we spend on?
Well, it's part of it is his personnel.
Okay,
He is actually split. I think he's 25% out of here, 50%, I believe, out of, general fund,
okay.
and then he's split amongst the
Among utilities.
utilities.
Stacy, what's the miscellaneous?
Miscellaneous, the 80,700, and, that is,
Oh.
I guess when I was talking about that insurance check that we get, 25%,
Okay.
yeah, that's when
the
it's
same
going
thing.
out.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
It's essentially just a pass-through.
Right.
They just hold it until they've got it cleaned up and secure, and then
Got it, okay.
As far as the draft budget's not been a whole lot of changes, estimated revenues around 24,000, and it's 59,000 less because of that insurance check, we're not gonna see that. Expenditures around 56,000. Then, of course, we'll have to do a transfer from the general fund of around 31,000 to make him zero.
On the utilities, I know that you've answered this in the previous years. Can you remind me why there's a utilities item on the budget? On the building permit fund?
If we go down
It's
to,
just telephone.
oh, yes, it is his telecom.
So Stacy, sorry, I get the 85,000 and the 81, but what's the 33,810?
33,810, that's, we go down to the details.
This is the draft. One more page.
Okay, so that's the total of all of these things.
Got it.
So the 25% insurance for fire, advertising, building permit deposit refund,
Got it, thank you.
I appreciate this budget breakdown so much. From the first time I looked at it to now, it's not as overwhelming.
It's a lot.
It's a lot,
It's
yeah.
It's a lot.
A lot of numbers.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
I'm good, thank you.
Move on, we'll just take a look at the summary for, the capital improvements, I'll just show you where we are at. Year to date, we have, brought in 689,000, we anticipate to bring in 824,000. On expenditure side, year to date, we have 487,000, we plan to spend around 550,000. Leaving us, I believe a surplus of 299,000 is where we hope to, we anticipate to end this fiscal year.
Can I ask something stupid? Not stupid, but just, so if we have over expenditures here, or under expenditures, so we have 300,000 additional, that gets, you know,
Surplus.
yeah, of a surplus, so when that surplus goes into a back fund, into the previous year's funds, correct?
Right.
Are those available for future projects?
They are.
Okay.
And so that was something, you know, I sent a message to Steve earlier today, we haven't obviously had a chance to do that,
Sure.
but, you know, just like on streets, so even though we just opened bids this week for an asphalt overlay, so redoing a street, that's not gonna happen in this budget year, you know what I mean? So it'll fall in next year, so,
Yeah, some of them are already taken,
Well-
are already
well, I guess-
planned to be.
right, but I
utilized.
guess my point is, so street fund specifically, if we wanted to do a larger street or multiple streets, we could do that, we just need to plan it ahead of time.
Yeah.
So yes, so this would be similar, we could pull from that, especially capital improvement fund for a specific project or a, you know what I mean?
And I guess my next question would be, so if we have a surplus in a certain very detailed fund, does that go into that detailed fund's previous balance?
If it has a
It's
specific fund,
restricted.
yes.
If it does have a specific, cause right now we
Right.
just, you know, we're not showing the previous funds for all of these, you know, it's
Right.
like the
So we're
police
on
capital
page-
improvements doesn't have like the previous year's
But police
fund.
capital improvements wouldn't have, it doesn't have its own fund,
fund, okay.
Right, right.
Well,
cause
you-
it's general fund.
Yeah, well, let me take into account, like, so say like,
Park.
Park, yeah,
Yeah, so-
park is, and I know
Okay.
park's coming up,
Sean, help me remember we're on page 32.
Okay.
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 And you don't
Okay.
have to go towards it,
Well,
I'm
no,
just.
because, okay, so you said parks,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So right here, Park and Rec,
Mhm.
Fund 210, let me enlarge this a little here. So we
That's
know-
restricted, right?
Yeah,
It is
that's-
restricted.
yeah.
So
So it
if there
would
is
have
a
to stay
fund
in there,
balance,
wouldn't it?
Mhm.
it rolls over and becomes, it gets added to the 710,000.
Yep.
So the Parks Department, when the Park Board reviews their budget, you know, right now, when we looked at that park fund, they don't quite have enough. They'd be spending in the deficit.
Yeah, so
They can
pull
choose to
from-
pull from their fund balance to make the budget whole.
And if you actually go to the Parks and Rec section in this document
There's
here,
like a
towards the
fund
bottom, it'll show the projected
Right.
beginning balance and ending balance.
Right.
Yeah,
it
I've
does
seen that,
show-
I was just curious, like, if each of these different funds, so like you have like the,
Which one?
insurance or whatever, you know, like
Right.
all the, well, no, I'm not talking about any of these in particular. I'm just
Okay.
talking about it
Cemetery.
in
In
kind of a
general.
general, like, you know, you have this, special insurance fund kind of
Right.
thing that and you spent, and you have like a $100 surplus that goes into
That fund.
the next fund, okay, so
Yeah.
each one, it doesn't just go into a big bank.
No.
That's what I was
Stays in that
curious.
fund.
That's all I was wondering.
Right, yeah. So like capital improvement sales tax.
Yeah.
We've got just over $1 million in our fund balance.
Right.
Well, that is their balance as of April 30th.
Right, but, right.
Yeah,
But I
small,
mean,
small
so-
details, but I think I get it now.
Right,
Thank
so-
you for entertaining.
Yeah, so if we don't spend everything in capital improvement sales tax fund for the current budget year, that remaining amount goes into this fund balance
Right.
for some future use. Okay,
Just use the streets.
so, okay, we ready to go back to page 32?
You remember?
Focus on
It's cause I told
experience.
someone to help me remember. Okay. All right,
So the main source of revenue for the capital improvement fund, as I mentioned earlier, is a half-cent sales tax. We also have grant revenues that sometimes comes into this fund. So, year-to-date, we're at 608.9, did I already do this part?
I think you
Revenues.
did part of it.
I don't know. So revenues year-to-date, we've, brought in 689,000. We project to bring in 824,000. And then on expenditures, yeah, we've spent, 487,000. We expect to spend 550,000. We budgeted a little over 1 million. A lot of that, I think, is the grants for the TAP project. We haven't,
Right, various
started that,
projects
so-
that have grants or
Yeah.
included in here.
yeah, there may have been other things we budgeted
Right.
for and didn't spend, or,
I think most of it, well, right here, sewer. Where is it? I just saw sewer and then I lost it. Oh, there's not in there.
no. Like the sidewalk capital improvement, yeah, that was part of the downtown project. We
Right.
budgeted 256, only
So what
spent
comes out
24
of
so far.
capital improvements is gonna be our match for those projects, but then also that grant would flow through this fund. Right?
Mhm.
I forgot that capital improvement wasn't joining us tonight at the finance committee, right, did we originally? But, Sherry Lee, the director of the community center, did mention and emailed Sally and I, and I
Right,
think
and it's
maybe
in-
Steve.
yeah.
It is in these now, okay.
Yep.
She's wanting to redo the gym, she's wanting to, what is it,
The gym floor,
not redo it, but just,
have it rescreened and refinished. Yes.
and she wants that done every 2 years? She wanted it every year,
Right, and
but,
I'm proposing right now every 2 years.
okay, that's what I
But
thought that you,
Yeah,
Did they ever have anybody look at that? Because
we haven't had it assessed yet, no. So,
before we sand it down until it's like it's a piece of paper.
but what they're doing is not sanding it down, they're not bringing in a belt sander, they're bringing in like a large buffing machine
Yeah,
with the abrasive pads, and it's called screening.
yeah.
So it doesn't eat away as much of the
Right.
wood surface.
I think the high school does it every summer to theirs too, back when we were in school, you know,
What's that?
buff the
Where
floors.
is this at?
Been down here.
Just gives it that really nice
The gym.
finish and protects the wood.
It's a wood floor.
I'm gonna scroll back up the revenues,
Restriction.
look at the
When
draft.
you're gonna fall through.
So the draft budget revenues were around 1.1 million, and part of that is, on the other, the 324, that's grant revenue coming in. So 754 in sales tax that we anticipate, and then the 324 is grant revenue. And miscellaneous, I don't know what's under that, but. So, and then the draft budget expenditures, that's what's been requested to us so far. Like I said, we're gonna save that for capital improvement to go through.
So this is what's requested, this is.
Yeah, a lot of times they're pretty close to being the same, but. So right now, we're at a deficit of, for next draft budget, 123,000.
Mhm.
So we'll either have to decide what to cut or take from prior year fund balance.
We'll have a capital improvement meeting to review that fund.
Right, we'll
And,
go more
and some of
details.
this will also continue to be worked through as I continue to meet with individual departments and superintendents. That's, like I said, we're not all the way through that process yet. So. Steve, we met with how many today?
We're working on it.
Yeah, I think it's warming up and there's work to be done.
Right. So. Anything else here?
Okay to move on, everyone? Okay. That's just the details.
Some of the equipment, sorry, I didn't pass, you don't have to go back. There was a couple of pieces of equipment paying off this year, right? Out of capital improvement, or was it in those two?
There was two,
So the loader we're paying off, that's half in capital improvement, half in special
Yeah.
streets.
um, the backhoe, we just paid off two backhoes actually.
This year, right, the current year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, so there's, yeah. So on some of these though, we do have to make the decision, are we purchasing Are we gonna have to purchase something that wasn't what we
Right.
leased? How are we replacing whatever?
Okay.
So, yeah, so those are literally some of the conversations we have ongoing right now.
Gotcha.
Trying to figure that out.
Okay, the cemetery fund. This source of revenue comes from grave openings and purchase of burial plots. It does not bring in enough revenue, so a transfer has to be done from the general fund. So year to date, we brought in almost 48,000. We project about the same. Expenditures, we've spent around 96,000. We anticipate to spend 116,000. With a surplus of around 54,000. And then on the draft budget, revenues, I budgeted 32,000. It's hard to budget, you never know how much you're gonna, bring in on that fund. Expenditures, 129,000. And then, once you do the transfer from general, they should flatline. I don't see any major changes in their budget.
Now, is it just, one individual in the cemetery crew, or do we have a
1.5.
part-time, 1.5?
Seasonal help.
Yeah.
Seasonal, right, so not even fully half, it's just during the summer I have a part-time.
Would we benefit from having a part-time person? I know we cut that out as well back when we were reevaluating the budget, but I'm looking at overtime, and I know that we're roughly at 2,000, probably, that we're paying.
So, well, 2,000 in.
Not that that's even close to a
overtime. I was
person,
gonna say,
another
not
person,
even
but-
in there, yeah.
And would it be easier and better managed, not that it's not managed well now, but to take some off of the one individual doing it? To have a part-time or another person? Have you
During
seen
the busy
it?
time, that's when we have the half
Cemeteries,
person.
We talked about the cemetery needs a half-time, it's 30 acres of mowing and,
Right.
it's a lot to keep up on, so.
Like a half-time all year, not just seasonal,
Well, no, not
Seasonal.
all year,
just seasonal?
Yeah.
Okay,
so another half-time.
Yeah.
It drops way off after grass seed.
Yeah,
cause that's where I notice where they're stressing the most, I feel,
right, it's keeping the
is-
grass mowed, and
yes.
weeds cut, yeah.
and I get that we're pulling from streets department, but they have their own stuff
Right.
to do as well. And with, like you said, we're technically 10 positions down, so we really don't have the room to be stealing from streets when they need that individual. So maybe it's something we look at is another part-time person in the cemetery during seasonal help, if we can, if we can afford it.
Right.
On the 22nd, we have our all hands on deck day, and
Yeah.
everybody's out there with the weed eaters, so.
That's the 22nd.
Yeah,
Put that on my
Bring your
So-
weed eater.
so we can definitely put some
What about
numbers
a zero
together
turn in
for
bush
adding
hog?
that part-time position for the next session.
Thank you.
You know, if we had.
I just kinda wanna see a number,
Right.
what it looks like.
It's a lot to work around.
Any other questions?
No.
Move on to airport.
We're gonna move on to airport.
Okay, so the airport, the revenues come from hangar rental fees and grant funding, and we do have some fuel
And
sales. Yeah, so year to date, we brought in 27,000, we anticipate around 81,000. Expenditures, around 77,000, we anticipate to spend 81,000. So we should we should flatline, because the 20, there at the top, the 21,900, that's actually reserves from prior year fund balance that they approved to use. And then the draft budget, and that large number is a grant revenue that's gonna be coming in.
That's at 685.
Yeah, and that's the T hangar grant, that project they're getting ready to do construction at the end of June,
Yeah, well, they're expecting the building materials to actually be delivered to the airport end of June.
Okay, so and then expenditures so far at 799,000. The airport board has not reviewed this budget yet to make changes and decide what they wanna do with their deficit that they've got so far.
I know a couple years ago, they approved each year gradually increasing their hangar fee. Is that still increasing next year as well?
And I know they're wanting to do a review, in comparison to other communities that have airports and what those payment fees are. We'll want to look at a couple different options, and so that's something that I'm reaching out to other city managers through the city manager listserv to get input on what others are doing, so.
Their fuel pump's working, so
Yes.
should start seeing somebody come on.
Yeah, now if they can get their modem.
Yeah,
Is that the only thing hanging them up on charging for fuel?
Well, they've been charging for fuel, but I guess like something happened in the last week, where it was, their modem that, connected to the internet, just something broke or fried on it, so they're waiting for the new one to come in so they can plug it in and get the, credit card machine working again.
yeah,
Yeah, they've been selling fuel, like, actually.
since the pumps are working.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We're spending a lot of time out there trying to plan improvements and stuff, so, yeah, actually today, we were out there, so. The new signage is up, we're getting there, so.
Ready to move on? Everybody just looks at me.
Economic development, its only source of income right now is grant revenue. Year to date, our revenues, we brought in 26,500. I think grant revenue is, wasn't it? Grant.
It's all through Welcome Home, it's grant revenue and homeowner matches.
Yeah. So we don't anticipate bringing in anything else this fiscal year. We, well, we're hoping, we're hoping to bring in some of that grant
I have everything
revenue.
submitted on another reimbursement, but I'm waiting to hear back.
Right.
So,
And expenditures, so far, we've spent 110,000, and part of that is the grant expenses. And then we anticipate around the same as far as projected to end this fiscal year at 113,000. We anticipated more grant revenue coming in this year, so we did not budget anything coming from the general fund into this to balance the budget. But it looks like we're probably gonna have to do a budget adjustment to make up the deficit, probably around 87,000. Unless we would get more grant revenue coming in before the end of the fiscal year, then that amount will reduce. But for the draft budget, we anticipate bringing in 310,000 and spending 232,000. Will leave us a surplus of 165,000. So that will be the revenues for the grant kind of catching up to itself.
and so just for those who don't understand that one quite as well, so the city fronts the expenditure to rehab the home. It has the owner match, but then the city foots the bill for the total rehab, and then we get reimbursed on it, and so that's where we're at. So we knew it would be back end heavy at the end of the grant, so this will be the last year.
Okay, and then moving on to utilities. Again, the utility committee has not reviewed any of their budgets yet, so I'm sure they'll make some recommendations to change some of this. But year to date, this is electric fund, year to date, we're at 6.4 million. We project to bring in 7.4 million in revenues. Expenditures, we have spent 4.8 million, we anticipate to spend 5.8 million. And then, we anticipate to end the year at 495,000 surplus. And then for their draft budget, revenues anticipated to be 7.2. We did for their, for the charges of, the kilowatt hours, we have been seeing a reduction. So we did reduce their revenue line around $200,000 there on the right side. You can see a reduction, yeah. And then on, the utilities and the expense line, that's the purchase of power, over to the right side, the 92,000. that's increasing, purchase of power, not knowing if we're gonna have a mild winter or mild summer or not, so that can fluctuate a lot. So, we anticipate having a surplus of around 9,000. And then that other uses, that is transfers going out. So that is 65,000 going to the replacement fund, which is the electric replacement fund. 212,000 going to the electric reserve fund. And, we'll have to revisit that to see if we want all of it to go to reserve fund or if we want it to go to replacement fund, but, 180,000 also going to reserve fund because the availability fee, that was what was recommended, that it all go to reserve fund. And then 352,000 of that, 8,000 is the general fund transfer. Okay. You guys got questions? This is the, yeah. This is the electric replacement fund that Charlie was talking about earlier, is where we're gonna start trying to build these funds up for replacements.
Well, I just say year 1 and 2 are gonna be rough, just across the board for all of these funds, cause we're starting from zero, pretty much, so.
So basically, for the draft budget, the only expenditures we have is for transformers and poles. So we anticipate to spend around 64,000 next year. Of course, the only revenue that comes in here is interest revenues. And then,
Right now, yeah.
right, and then whatever funds that we bring over from the electric department. the operating-
Transfer into this
yeah.
fund. And so that's something, so these numbers look way off, like we stated earlier, we've not determined what that transfer looks like yet to these repair and replacement funds.
And this is the electric reserve account. If you scroll down, so basically there is no revenue that comes in here other than the transfer from the electric operating account. Again, we have, bank interest, that funds it a little bit, 38,000, so that's pretty good. So our ending fund balance, if you look to the far right, after this next budget year, we anticipate to have 1.8 million. I think our goal was like 1.4 million, yeah, our reserve goal is 1.4 million, so we'll exceed that into, and 2 or 3 years ago, we started this fund with $19,000, so we've made a huge progress to this fund balance reserve account.
And that balance, that goal is based on the policy that we have, it's 25% of the previous year's operating fund, is that?
Operating expenditures,
Right,
yes.
expenditures, right. So that's where that number comes from.
And this is used in case of a tragedy, emergency.
Yes.
Well, just to put it in perspective, February of 21, the bill was 1.6 million for that 1 month.
Right.
So that's why we had to finance it for 5 years. Luckily, there's no interest,
But right, we're still paying.
we're still paying on that. So that's why we wanted to build up reserve funds so we don't have to finance it. At the beginning, they were going to charge interest on that, and then they come back and made it no interest, so that helped. Okay. And this is the water fund. Year to date, we have brought in 758,000, we project to bring in 904,000. Expenditures, 685,000, we anticipate to spend 815,000, leaving a surplus of around 89,000. Then for our draft budget, tie-ins in the, council meetings and all of the utility committee meetings, we keep seeing a reduction in our usage, so I have reduced the sales amount around 40,000 over there.
Yeah, 871 to 830.
based upon what we budgeted this year, yeah. And then due to budget adjustments that we've already done, we've already reduced what we had budgeted. We had quite a bit more budgeted than the 871 even.
Yeah, at mid-year, we did an adjustment to that fund.
So we anticipate total revenues of 180,000. We anticipate to spend 861,000. Right now, we're at a deficit of 23,000.
And so just of note, and again, we'll share all of this and have the utility committee review all of this. The water rates themselves have not been adjusted since 2018. So those rates have stayed exactly where they were for the past 6 years. So, just keep in mind, yeah. Any questions on any of that?
Okay, Senate electric fund, this is the replacement fund for the water. We do have grant revenue that comes in here, we've got the, is it the well and power that we're in the process of, the grant that we have, the ARPA grant. I think it was a $3.7 million grant. So they're currently in the design phase, so that's why this year, so far, we've only spent around 187,000. Or well, we've got 187,000 in revenues from that grant, so they're working on it, and we've paid some out and received some funds in there. But for next budget year, we're not exactly sure what to budget in that line yet, we're still waiting on the engineers to give us better numbers. So right now, we just kind of plugged in a 1.6 million, because construction is supposed to start at the end of this, probably October, November this year, I believe. That could change, who knows, but, so we plugged in about 1.6 million in revenues. Yeah, for the draft budget. Yeah, and then expenditures, of course, so you've got the revenues up top, then you have the expenditures down at the bottom. We also have the, lead line service, that grant that we're working on.
And the IMI.
Yeah, so the grant is 150,000 on the lead line, but 180,000 in expenditures, cause our match is 50,000. And then we've also got budgeted for water line replacements, and we did plug in $20,000 for fire hydrant repairs. So right now, the, expenditures are more than the revenues, so we'll have to decide what we want to do with that in our utility committee meeting, cause right now we're at 75,000 deficit for next budget year in this fund.
Can we move some of those expenditures out of capital improvements potentially for like the fire hydrant and the others just to keep this fund balanced?
I mean, that's an option. Yeah. But honestly, capital improvement, right now, we're over as well.
Sure.
So if we move any of this into capital improvement, we're even farther over, so
Which, that fund's get more of a balance compared to this one here,
as far as a revolving balance,
Right,
yes.
yeah.
Do you want to move, I guess that's more of a philosophical question and one that'll go to the utility
Right.
committee. You know, do you wanna start subsidizing your utility with your other funds?
I'm just saying it's something to consider. that
Right,
it's an
right, no,
option.
no,
Right.
I agree, and
Yeah.
I'm just,
Right,
there's a lot to think about in that question.
right.
Anything else on water?
Our reserve account, basically the only thing that comes in here is, interest revenue, and then anything that comes from the water operating account. So our fund, our 25%, goal for the water fund is 208,000, so we have a balance of 776,000.
So that could be another
Another
option,
option,
yeah.
right? If we're 3 times what our reserve goal is, we could pull from that more. So I would probably prefer that over.
I agree.
revenues, we're at 916,000, we anticipate to bring in just over 1 million. Expenditures, 862,000, we plan on spending around 1 million, with a surplus of almost 45,000. The draft budget, again, we did reduce the sales revenue, cause we keep seeing a reduction in that line. Total revenues are just over 1 million. And then our expenditures are 1.1 million, so as you can see, we are at a deficit of 161,000. It's quite a bit of difference there. Now, we do have, 2 extra personnel in this budget,
Right.
because, it is mandated by DNR that we have 4 guys working down at the.
So that's a good portion of what's pushing us.
Right.
With the improvements at the wastewater treatment plant, of course, the cost of maintaining that is gonna go up, and the financing piece of it as well. Were we looking at a rate study
For
for
sewer?
sewer?
No, it's built in with the SRF funding that brings how you're supposed to calculate that rate. So we have a draft of that from Jeff, right?
I think so.
I need to see if he can be here. I didn't even think about that. We need to see if he can be here for utility committee meeting, so that he can explain the calculations, because it's a very specific, multi-page computation, about how you develop what those rates are.
Okay.
So,
Okay, cool.
yeah. It's intense. So,
Yeah, we knew this year, water and sewer has been very tight,
Right.
and we were concerned going into this budget year, especially sewer with all the extra costs coming up.
and then we do have the interim bond also, so that short-term bond to help fund the phase 2 engineering that's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have the interest payments on that interim bond in this next budget year.
Yeah, that's why on the capital improvement line, the far right column, that 12,700,
Is higher.
that's why that's higher, is because of that, those interest payments for that.
So we don't expect the full bond to close till maybe December, January of this coming year. And then, then we'll have a whole nother set of what things look like, so.
Okay.
Any other questions on that part? No.
This is the sewer replacement fund. Again, we do have the grant, the ARPA grant in here, which is a total of $5 million grant. What's budgeted there over the 2.something million, that is, most of that's grant revenue.
This here?
Yeah. So year to date, though, we've, brought in 260,000. We project to bring in 284,000. With expenditures, 261,000. So, and then, a surplus of 23,000 in this budget. And then, for the draft budget, so right at 2.1 million in revenues, expenditures right now are almost 2.3 million, with a deficit of 143,000. So what's in those expense lines, we got in situ form, 100,000, that's something that really needs to be done for our sewer lines. Then I engineer, that's part of a grant also, but the expenditures are 61,000. There should be an offset in revenue there also, and it's kind of mixed
Part
in
of
that,
this.
yeah. And then of course, the sewer upgrade, that 2 million, that's the expenditures, and then the 40,000 is, okay, they requested a work truck. Do you wanna explain the truck that they're?
Yes.
Basically,
The truck that they were
sewer
using.
plant, their truck had to go to Purple Wave because it was unsafe to drive it. They'd had it for 20 plus years, so they're borrowing a truck from the electric department, and that offsets their capabilities of getting out on the jobs. They're using bucket trucks to drive around right now, so basically we just wanna pick up a truck, and it doesn't have to even be a half-ton, they could do with a smaller truck and stuff, they don't haul things all that large, so, and especially with putting 2 new crew members on out there, we're gonna need a little more mobility for them, so. It's important. They're using the vehicles down to, they're getting their use out of them, so. Their vehicle also is utilized for runs to take samples down to Springfield.
So I figure, was it the Chevy S10 that went?
For a long time.
Yeah.
What was left of it?
I was
Yeah,
just saying, I haven't
right.
seen it in a while, so I wondered.
It's parked for Purple Wave. They may have to tow it out, so.
Purple Wave is when we sell them at the auction, basically. So.
Any other questions on?
You looking for the end of it?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
The debt service schedule, I was like, where is this? I love this.
Okay, then the
Alright.
sewer reserve fund, basically the only revenue that comes in is, bank interest, and then anything that comes over from the operating account. So, our reserve goal balance is 244,000, so we still will
That's
not,
shy.
we're still shy of that at 15,000. So all of our sewer accounts are struggling.
But that's been the case, I mean, they've been the
Yeah.
toughest ones for the last few
Yeah.
years, so. And there you go, Kayla's favorite slide.
It is, it's like an amortization schedule for a mortgage. I like this, it's how close are we getting to paying things off?
I do wanna note that this debt service schedule compared to last one, I was looking at what the, auditor, I was trying to balance to what the auditor had, and making sure my numbers were correct. The last year's was not correct. All the COP numbers were incorrect last year, but these are more, so, but the correct numbers, and they line up with what the auditor has.
So notice for the 24-25 column, under the COP utilities, under utility, under electric, looks like it's missing a number there.
Oh,
value.
We did say this was preliminary.
Okay.
Right?
That's what I was
Yeah.
gonna ask.
Okay, sorry,
Sorry.
Sean. I knew I messed up somewhere, I just didn't know where.
Found it.
So let's review next one.
Looks like majority of our debt is from the COPs.
Mhm.
Much needed, improvements, and actually one is mandated for the wastewater treatment plant.
Mhm.
We're still paying that off.
And what, next year we'll add another,
Right.
what, 1.4 million
Mhm.
estimating?
Thank goodness for the ARPA grants that we got from
Right.
DNR.
Right,
And-
cause what, the total project was 9.5 million?
Almost 10.
So we got 5 million in ARPA funds, we're supposed to be getting 2 million in SRF funding grants.
Right.
And then we've applied for the CDGB grant, which is another 750,000. So it should bring it down to closer to 1.4 million.
Right, that is actually in the bond
Mm.
that we're trying.
So much better than 10.
Mhm.
Should ask the EPA to pay for it,
Right.
it's our mandates.
That's all I have. The only other question back to, do we want to fund the, fireworks again this upcoming budget year, the 25 budget year? Right now, we have 10,000 budgeted for this budget year.
Mhm.
For next budget year, do we wanna keep that in, or?
So I'll give you a little update on that. Community involvement has been meeting quite a bit lately, and they have taken, there's been a few very active members, which is what I've been looking for and begging for. And they're so active that they've decided that they kind of want to take this, the fireworks itself, and put it into a 501c and operate under a business essentially. And so they've gotten approved for that. And now they're wanting to be able to put funds into this account all year long. And so it wouldn't require the city to man the fireworks per se. So this committee that they've created will do this, which is phenomenal. But it is on the agenda for Tuesday night's meeting to see if they can get approved to use the 10,000 that's in our budget item currently. So the board will vote on that on Tuesday. But I think that it's a very good, budget line item, but I do understand also if we decide to use that money elsewhere or what. But, currently we did 10,000, but I don't know if we wanna continue to do that large of an amount. So it's up to you guys, I'm leaving it open to the committee.
Since we're not doing any votes tonight, we'll have to
Right.
wait till the next meeting, but something to think about.
Right.
what we wanna
Look
do.
over the budget, see what we think and how much we want to contribute, to take in front of the board to vote on.
So again, tonight was meant to be just kind of the introduction for all of you of kind of what we're looking at. Understand we have lots of tweaks and fine tuning to do, but this gives you a general idea kind of where we're at. So yeah, so you guys have questions, things like that, send it to us. And we'll continue working with staff and then through the various committees as we move forward to fine tune this
And I would like to add in that the sooner, like, the quicker that you have a question and can get it emailed over to, Steve, Stacy, and Sally. Steve, Stacy, Sally. The quicker that they can get with their department heads and their staff, to where we're not having to have a meeting and then have another meeting to just touch simple subjects. To where if we just ask our questions, we can come and hopefully get it done and completed. I understand that some of our questions are not gonna be answered until the other committees meet and bring us information. But as you get questions, don't write it down and save it for the next meeting. Go ahead and email it to them. Please CC, me and, Sean on there and everybody else if you want to be included. We would love to just get this ball rolling. I think this has been one of the quickest years that I've been a part of that we've started tackling the budget. Last year we did, yeah, I mean, pretty quick. It wasn't rough, no, yeah, I think so. But it's a good thing that we're doing this now. Just don't wait to ask your questions, please.
I like this format, appreciate the work that's gone into this so far, and I know the next month and a half is gonna be really busy for all of us. We're gonna have a lot of meetings.
Yeah.
I know the last week of June, we're gonna have to make the vote, at the board, for the next, budget there, so it's gonna be very busy.
and I just wanna give kudos to Stacy, because all of this format, everything you've seen tonight is all Stacy, so.
Yeah, I love that it breaks down each, department and what they have in their budget and where it's going, how it's going, what our plans are. It makes it so much easier to be able to review and even come back, because that's what I have to do most of the time. Start reviewing it and leaving it
It's
back.
easier to find things
Yeah.
in the budget.
So next I'd like to target our next meeting date. We have meetings scheduled for other committees, so I'd like to meet as semi as possible because I am gone on a couple of trips this summer. So I just wanna make sure that I'm present and able to be a part of it.
So at
I
this
know,
point-
I'm taking vacation.
At this
I'll
point,
be out of
we
the country, I
have,
don't know.
sorry, utility committee meeting next Wednesday on the 15th. We have park board meeting on the 20th. Those are the only ones I know of so far, so we'll still need to at some point schedule a CIP, and I know sometime in June, the airport has their annual meeting.
Yes.
So those two are still coming.
Parks and Rec, what time is that on that Monday?
They always have theirs at 5:30.
Okay.
I've not heard any different.
Me either. Okay, and then Sean, what does capital improvement mean?
Well, still finding some
question.
members to fill that committee, but, we should have some appointments on Tuesday,
Okay.
and then we'll schedule a date from there.
Okay,
So do we aim for the second week of June, just to capture majority of the meetings from the other boards and committees?
yeah, could we do the 12th at?
Are we wanting a joint finance and CIP, or
Yeah.
what are we talking about?
Okay.
We could,
Go over CIP first and then finance?
yeah, I think so.
Pretty close.
So the 12th of June.
The 12th would be a utility committee
Yep.
meeting.
The 5th, we're gone.
How about the
Did you say you have utility on the 12th?
Yes.
I am gone, but I don't necessarily have
Let's
to
go
be
online.
present in person. I can Zoom.
Slumber party, man. Do what we gotta
I'm
do.
gone from the 12th to the 21st.
Okay, well, what about the 10th, the Monday?
I I'm good with the tenth.
I'm up for the rest of the finance.
And there's a staff meeting that night, but I don't know if that impacts anybody. Other than me. Shoot for the 10th. I'd hate to push it any later.
Yeah, I think,
Because
yeah,
especially if we do need another one, then,
exactly,
yeah,
yeah,
so June 10th,
yeah, I like it.
what time?
Wanna do 5:30?
That works for me.
Okay, 5:30, okay. All right, so this is CIP and finance. Okay.
All right, any questions?
Big thanks to these two for schooling me and teaching me up on budget stuff. And you wouldn't know it, but they're putting in weekends working on this stuff. They're really putting in some hard work, so.
Thank you both.
Thanks.
Tis the season.
We'll bring you guys a bologna sandwich.
Oh,
I'm just
please
kidding.
don't.
Just kidding.
Please don't, just let me start.
No, I'm kidding, I'm kidding. I appreciate you guys coming tonight. I know that it was short notice and didn't go as long as possible. I mean, as it could have. I was really expecting to be here till like 8:30, 9 o'clock
Well,
is what I
that's what
told
we've done
Sally.
in the past, we
Yeah.
went line by line, and I just don't know that it's necessary.
Yeah.
Like,
Not at this
So you
point.
guys
Not as
can
an
tell us
introduction,
otherwise.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so, if there's not any questions from the committee or the board or city staff, I'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 7:57.
That's not bad.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.